this story back in the news. Dr. Fauci under fire ahead of his congressional testimony this week. Republicans highlighting his private COVID diary entries that show his evolving relationship with President Trump and other top officials during the COVID-19 pandemic. And Mark Meredith has the details in Washington. This story's heating up, Mark.
Dana, it sure is. It's quite the read. Dr. Fauci left government service back in 2022, but some lawmakers think his time at the National Institutes of Health deserve much harsher scrutiny. His detailed diary was posted by Senator Rand Paul over the weekend, and it shows what occurred as the pandemic began. Go back to January 26, 2020. Dr. Fauci wrote, it appears, using data that the first infection was in early December and was not connected to the market. The infection spread among people weeks before the Chinese reported that they were dealing with a new infection, and that gave the virus time to establish itself in a multi-generational spread. Now, that market we're talking about is out in Wuhan, China. Fauci has long said he does not believe the virus began as a result of a lab leak nearby, but the feds are split on that lab leak theory, believing it's very well possible. Fauci has also long fought with Senator Paul over the origins of COVID, how the government invested in medical research, and how the first Trump administration handled the crisis. In the diary, Fauci spent a lot of time marveling at his media attention. He wrote, "For better or worse, I'm becoming an international celebrity. Calls from all over the world." In a later entry, he goes, "Petitions to vote me sexiest man alive. Major stories about my basketball career at Regis." One person who Fauci talked a lot about and tangled with was President Trump. Fauci details their relationship, and he said that he often struggled to course correct as Trump would get mad about something Fauci would say about the virus. He wrote, "I am concerned that we really do not have a clear path to open up the country at the end of April. No one is really in charge or even knows what they are doing." Fauci claimed after the 2020 election, Trump undermined everything he was trying to do. And there is a lot to unpack here. This diary is over 1,000 pages. It makes for a fascinating look back at that dark time in U.S. history. But Dana, this is important because, as you mentioned this week, Fauci is back on the Hill on Wednesday.
Welcome back to the Benny Show, live edition, special James Woods edition. And we have James locked and ready to go. Hollywood legend. So excited to finally talk with James Woods. We'll be doing that live on the show. Today is Monday, July 27th, 2026. We were not even going to do a show today. We're in Washington, D.C. We have traveled here for a meeting. We were in New York all weekend. I brought my kids to New York City. And because my daughter's name is Eloise and she just turned 6, and I've been promising her entire life that I would take her to the plaza on her 6th birthday. So Dad made good on a promise, and we've just been running them. New York is an exhausting city if you have 4 little kids, but I couldn't believe it when Kara, our producer, told us that James was ready to go and was locked in for Monday. And so you got to make sure that you are ready for the legend. And we are today. A massive bombshell day for news. Dr. Fauci will be live on Capitol Hill. Just a programming note, we will be live for that entire congressional testimony, and we'll have Rand Paul on right afterward. So we will be hustling for you. We are grinding. We are here in Washington, D.C., thrilled at our partners, AFPI. Thank them for letting us use the studio. Got the old background, ready to rock, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show. I got to tell you, I've been such a massive fan of James Woods for my entire life. Hercules, the Disney animated Hercules, is one of my all-time favorite movies, and he plays Hades in that. But also James Woods High in Family Guy. Or Casino. I don't know. I'm not even sure which would be my favorite James Woods role. Maybe we'll talk with him about it. But his role as a patriot trying to save the state of California is something that James is perhaps best known for today. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome to the chat, to the live, the legend, actor James Woods. I don't know, man. I don't know. Too much. I have your whole catalog pulled up here. Maybe Surf's Up or Scary Movie 2. I'm not sure, James.
Well, don't laugh about Scary Movie 2. Actually, Scary Movie 2 is one of my absolute favorite things that I ever did. And the funny thing, the Wayans brothers were all involved. And when we were, there was a moment when I enter and see the demon, and Damon said, should you, you're a priest and here's Satan. I mean, should you have a reaction? I said, yeah. He said, what are you thinking of? I said, no, just roll the camera. And, of course, I come in with Andy Richter. I see the demon. I'm in my priestly outfit. And I go, oh, fuck this. And away I go. And it has been, I have had more people come up to me and recreate that moment, their version of that moment. Pardon for speaking my French on your show. But, hey, you gave me an introduction I don't think I could actually live up to, but thank you so much for all those kind words. And I feel like I want to do, Dr. Livingston, I presume, because I've quoted you so many times on X. Our paths have crossed. But I got to tell you something funny. I was telling Alex, you're a guy who helps prep. We got to set up with the computers and stuff. And I said, I'm getting all these responses on X. Everybody's going, oh, James Woods and Benny Johnson, what a combo. And then there's the guys who go, you got to watch out for Benny. He's like a globalist grifter, and you're America first. And I said, well, A, I'm usually pretty good at handling myself, but B, I've been like quoting Benny for like eons, it feels like. And we agree on everything. I didn't notice the global grifter thing, but of course they say all sorts of, I'm a Nazi and all that other shit to me. So, you just get used to it. It's just never ending how much you have to cut the wheat from the chaff just to get a point across these days in social media. It's really scary,
So the comment section is a dumpster fire. It is the seventh circle of hell. You've played Hades. You've interacted with actual demons. Are they worse than Gavin Newsom?
Well, here's what's really horrible about Gavin Newsom, if I may say so. Okay. I mean, he's a grifter. There's no two ways about it. He's just such I wish I were more eloquent about this, but, he's a grifter. He's a liar. He's a cheater. He's done every single disgusting thing a man can do with a wife, with a state, with friends. I mean, in the middle of COVID, he not only is not wearing his mask while they're arresting some guy all alone on a beach, but he's at the French Laundry. French Laundry sounds fun. It was $1,100 per person. And they're all sitting there with their masks off, laughing about the peons who have to walk around with these paper diapers on their face and their kids. And, I cannot wait, by the way, for the Fauci testimony. I cannot wait for this, because as my wife Sarah said at one point, she said, it doesn't seem too likely that a pangolin in a wet market caused this, considering they live about 3,000 miles away from Wuhan. And, it's just like, oh, and by the way, there was this this horrible place where they literally manufacture disease a block away. I won't say that it's a government-run facility, but it was certainly funded by Fauci and the National Institute of Health.
Oh, it certainly was, yes.
And at the time, I literally, some of my best friends would not invite us to dinner because my wife refused the vaccine. And I refused all the boosters, and I'm sorry to say I took the vaccine, but I had a different situation. I mean, I'm, in my 70s, and I have certain medical situations. So I'm thinking, okay, I guess I better do what the doctors tell me. But I was really, really concerned about it. We'll talk about that another time, but this is going to be, man, a great week. A problem we're going to have, of course, and this is something we need to talk about at length at some point. The Democrat Party, as we know, has gone completely and utterly insane. They're just off the charts insane. And, I don't have to list the ways in which they're insane. We all know why. And the Republican Party has just tacitly agreed to go along because they're both just two big groups of hogs with their snouts in the trough. And that's all it's about. So we're going to see some amazing things with Rand Paul and Fauci. And Rand Paul's done a great job at bringing this guy to task. And then the Congress under John Thune will do absolutely nothing. Oh, maybe write a nasty letter, and and then ask him please not to go on vacation another 6 days out of every 7-day week. But he will do nothing because he's just Paul Ryan Redux. Virtual, I'm not going to say traitor because, but he is really, to do no interim nominations or
Yes.
of judges and so on. It's just horrible that this Congress, when you're a political party and you finally have control of the executive branch, minor control, but still control of the executive branch and a friendly Supreme Court, and you can't accomplish a single thing like making a law that you have to prove who you are to vote, we're just in terrible shape. We're just in terrible shape. And I have an advantage being I'm in my 70s. I lived through a lot of the eras of the United States when things were difficult. I lived through the Vietnam era. And back then, there were people burning things down in the street as they were now. There were people doing horrible things and not supporting our troops there, whether you were for the war or not. I'm from a military family. You just have to support your troops when they're in harm's way. But I always understood at least how people were thinking. I might have thought it was rotten thinking. I think Jane Fonda's thinking and behavior was appalling and disgusting. And I would not sit next to her at a dinner party once. I politely said to my host, I will not sit next to her. I just wouldn't sit next to her. My father had 2 Purple Hearts. I'm not going to sit next to her.
Patriot.
Okay. And we don't have to explain why. We know why. And Jim Stockdale was a friend of mine. He was the longest member of the Hotel Hilton as a prisoner of war. But you knew she would say why she thought what she thought. I despise it, but I understood what she was saying. I don't know what's going on now in the world, in America especially. Hey, I'm a Democrat. It's like, so you support 30 or 40 million unvetted, unvaccinated. You wouldn't invite my wife to a dinner party because she didn't take the vaccine, but you'll let 30 million people stroll across the border. They're not vaccinated. They're all military age males. What has happened to this country is I'm just in shock. And Gavin Newsom, to answer your question, represents everything about that aspect of the party. The Democrat Socialists of America are lunatics. They're just lunatics. Nuts. Goodbye. You're nuts. But Gavin Newsom is like trying to get elected. And I love the recent poll that the bartender from, screwed her constituents out of 30,000 jobs the first month she was in office. She's what is she, like 22%? Gavin Newsom is 8%. It was just so delightful. Anyway,
but he went to your neighborhood.
Did you want to say anything before I leave?
He was in your neighborhood. I remember because you had to abandon and watch your own house burn down, and you'd been in that house for decades, and you loved that place. And
no, actually, it was even worse than that. It was actually worse than that. We thought our house had burned down. It didn't. Every house around us burned down, either partially or completely. But we have smoke damage is another story. And our insurance, because our State Farm, and I'll say the name, canceled our insurance just a couple of months before the fire. And virtually everybody in our neighborhood, except one guy, and they all call me up and say, did State Farm cancel you? And I go, yeah, And by the way, I don't actually blame State Farm. I blame, again, Gavin Newsom, because he made it so impossible for them to actually survive as a business in the worst fire area in the state. And they said, look, you got to give us some leeway. And he didn't. But the bottom line, yes, in 1 hour, we fled, in the middle of houses burning, from 17 minutes, from the time I looked at this one area that a neighbor said, get up here and look at this, an area that every day we drove past, I said to Sarah, well, this is where the fire is going to start because they're not clearing the brush. And it turns out that it's actually managed by the state. Okay. And the last fire started in the same place. That's where the fire started, just a few houses from where we lived. And as we lived, this fire that was absolutely criminal negligence on the part of our former brigadista of the Venceramos Brigade, Karen Bass, literally a communist Venceramos Brigade leader, masquerading now as a moderate Democrat. I laugh in her face. Their criminal negligence, yes, it was criminal negligence, allowed this to happen. The reservoir was empty. 113 million gallon reservoir, empty because they had to fix a tear. And guess what? The brush is all back and it's empty again. It's completely empty. They must have missed a few houses to give to their buddies who are going to, they're literally going to build a bus depot where Gladstone's restaurant was at the bottom of Sunset. I said, a bus depot or bus stop? Bus depot. They have like 50 buses there, which is insane. But the reason they're doing it is right now it's such a fire hazard because the Palisades are so congested. But Gavin Newsom figured out, hey, we can get in low-income housing, which is very dense population, if we put in a bus depot. There's some trick in the laws that allows them to do this. But it's more people are going to die if you do that. There's no question about it. But it's all a grift because when they build low-income housing, it never gets to the people who need it. He spent hundreds of billions of dollars on the homeless, and they don't on these little homes that everybody's going to live in and so on. And like they end up, well, nobody wants to live in them, so we're going to rent them out at this price, and now all the rich people will get them. It's just everything is a scam. Everything is a grift with these people. It's just shocking.
Everything's a scam. Okay, so you talked about Karen Bass, Spencer Pratt. What happened there? I know that Spencer was your neighbor in the Palisades.
You know what happened there? Because we don't have a Vote America Act, because the states that want to misbehave, like supermajority Democrat California, just simply don't care who you are if you vote. They make a point of it. When Spencer Pratt was now one of the two in California, two people got to move on to the election. One was Karen Bass. That was fixed, I'm sure. But let's say it wasn't even. Spencer Pratt was the other by a huge margin. And then we got to wait for the votes to come in. And they always come in the middle of the night. And, it was like 24,000 votes in a statistical improbability, from what I understand. 24,000 votes, not one for Spencer Pratt. It's a mathematical possibility, but if you know anything about statistics, it's a statistical improbability, if indeed that happened. And, they just don't care. Does anybody literally still believe that Uncle Joe, Joseph Biden got 81 million votes, millions more than Obama, who was one of the most popular people when he was elected? It's inconceivable. And yet they do it with glee. They literally leave the reservoir open in the Palisades with the brush all back. We're another fire hazard. Meanwhile, the fire department guys, and men and women are extraordinary in California. They risk their lives, all these fires. Every time these fires happen, their lives are at risk. But the people running it, the lady who was appointed by the woman fire chief who was appointed, for LA, on her biography, though, she literally said, my main concern will be diversity, equity, and conclusion in the makeup of this fire department. And you say, and water, is that of any interest to you? Or fire hydrants or hoses and any of that stuff work? Do you care? I mean, we had a real neighborhood in the Palisades. Yes. That so many people there either were born in those houses. They're all built in the 1960s, and by the Lockman brothers. And they're all very similar, these little beautiful mid-century houses with the most spectacular views of what makes California beautiful. And when you move in, we did everything in our house to make it look exactly like it was. We were the second owners. And our neighbors are coming by, oh, thank God that you're not building a mausoleum. I said, no, I want to be part of the neighborhood. We all became friends immediately. Andrew, Stephanie, Havisa, all of our friends. We, in fact, my neighbor and I, and Sarah, saved the life of our 94-year-old neighbor who, in a confusion in the middle of all of it, was left there, and he had severe Alzheimer's, and his son was on the East Coast, and it was a terrible situation, but we were able to save his life. It was close to being one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen, but we all managed to do it. And we all did it because we were friends. I happened to have all my neighbors' numbers, phone numbers. Hey, man, you know, your dad, I think he's still at the house, and they said they were coming back from him. They didn't, and blah, blah, all this happened. I loved living in the Palisades. And now people are buying 3 and 4 lots at a time against the CCNRs of the neighborhood, but nobody's stopping them. And they're going to build big box mausoleums, and they're going to ruin it, and it's going to be gone forever. And it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And, you know, our house, the insurance company, and we're in a lawsuit, so I can't say anything. Although I will say positively, they're working with us, the state insurance. They weren't, but they are now once we file the suit. I mean, they were, but not really. And they're saying basically you got to rebuild the whole house because of smoke damage. At first they said, we don't cover smoke. She literally said that to one of the people. We don't cover smoke damage. I said, well, you know, in a catastrophic fire that burns down 16,000 houses and murders 31 people through negligence, there's often smoke. But you know the old joke about flood insurance, it covers everything unless there's water involved. But I'll tell you, the insurance companies in America, they're not your good friends. It's a bunch of bullshit.
You're right about Gavin Newsom making it impossible for people to do insurance, though, claims in California and running them out of the state. And Karen Bass, Gavin Newsom, you'd say that they're criminally negligent. It sounds like Gavin Newsom might actually get his day in court. They've got a federal investigation into him and his wife. And his wife was very close with Harvey Weinstein, and she's run some very, very shady nonprofits. I don't know if you know anything about that, but yeah.
Well, you know this. You know that there was a concert, like they often do in these catastrophic situations. Bravo to the people who were involved in Hollywood and in Nashville, whatever. They came together and raised over $100 million. Not one penny of that. I don't know anybody in the Palisades. See the single penny, but right away, the first partner, Harvey's side piece there, she got like whatever, so many millions of dollars to start running, you know, the grift. I'm sorry, did I say grift? You know, the repatriation or remediation of the neighborhood, and of course nobody got anything. It was another scam, you know, and it's a shame because the people who were out there performing and doing that really were putting their best foot forward and really trying to help, but they didn't get, you know, they didn't get a fair shake either.
Yes. So, but have you been following this Gavin Newsom federal investigation? And do you know anything about what his wife was up to, or what are the rumors in California? Gavin seems quite spooked about this. He's doing all these very dark, threatening videos. He seems pretty pissed off. And then we find out that this all was opened up under Joe Biden. So it was like Kamala Harris running
Joe
this.
Biden.
How dirty is California politics, man?
Well, and the whistleblower was wearing a wire evidently for a couple of years. But here's the question that you have to ask yourself: what will ever be done about it with this Republican Congress? And the answer is, as usual, nothing. Nothing. They won't do anything. You know, Trump, people have their opinions about Trump, but I say, you know, there's one thing about Trump. The things that he says he's going to do, he really, really, really tries to do. He doesn't just talk about it and send an angry letter and all that. We're going to close the border. It's an open wound in this country. It's letting in this cancer of Muslim invaders, and I'm not talking about Muslim people per se. I'm talking about these military-age guys that come walking across the border, and they don't have our best interests at heart. I can tell you that. You know, and when you think, oh, we've got control of the border, said the border czar, Kamala Harris, it's like a joke. I laugh in your face, you idiot. You know what is being in control of the border? What Donald Trump did, he closed it tight. He locked it up. Not a person has come across it illegally. Not one. And they were letting them in by the millions. And why? So they could vote illegally. Yes. And I will never, ever, ever change my mind about that. Okay. And it will be proven eventually, of course. And the other reason why is because if you bloat the population of any state, New York, California, all the blue states, well, the states gorged with, they may not be blue states, but they act like blue states because they're gorging them with the illegal aliens. And then if you end up having 10 million extra people, you're going to have more members of Congress, because there was a decision made by an earlier court that it's just a matter of counting the people who live in these states, reside in these states, not citizens, when of course what the Constitution does require and should require is that the only people who will be counted in the census are citizens of the United States. And if I were president, or if I could give advice to the president, I'd say cancel every federal holiday except the 4th of July and Election Day. And if the votes aren't counted by midnight, they don't count, except for military ballots from overseas.
So what is your message to John Thune? You seem pretty upset about John Thune.
Well, John Thune, my message is, who owns you? Who owns you? Because you're not doing anything for the United States. What do you think? I mean, obviously, Who Wants to Save America Act? This is a trick question, by the way.
Everyone.
Okay. Here's the thing. It's something like 82% of Republicans and 75% of Democrats.
Yes.
I was a Democrat for decades because I grew up in New England. I was kind of a Kennedy Democrat. We knew the Kennedys had their flaws, but John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, they really believed in, a genuine great society. They believed in overturning all these horrible the Jim Crow laws, and they did a lot for America in a good way. And then, of course, people took the Great Society and turned it into a grift, because they're always going to do that. They're always going to end up, well, how can we make money on it? I mean, people never talk about this because people just don't understand it, so politicians don't talk about it. The fact that we have a $38 trillion deficit is going to end up being one of the most catastrophic engines of destruction of this country eventually. Because my mother grew up during the Great Depression. She says, Jimmy, you don't know what the Depression was like. Nobody had any money. Like guys who used to, my banker, not her banker, she was a kid, but your banker would be standing on the corner selling apples. People would have, a hot dog for dinner, a hamburger, and then a whole family would divide it up. I mean, it's not a joke. I'm sure people will snicker and make jokes about it. But the bottom line is it was a horrible, horrible, horrible time in this country. And we're set for it again. And how much of that $38 trillion, if you had to guess, when I was a kid, I lost my dad at a very early age. And, when you're a kid, you always say, gee, if God would ever let Dad come back, what would I say to him? What would I show him? What would I, it was a kind of childhood dream. But I always wonder what would happen if my dad or my mom, God rest her soul, my brother, God rest his soul. Hey, what do you think of this? What is it? Well, we're $38 trillion in deficit. Wow, where did that money all go? Well, here's a bunch of guys from Somalia, and they've taken several trillion of it, and it's all a scam. It's all crooked. It's a horrible violation of the American way of life. Yes. And the guy running the whole thing up there was just the Democrat candidate for vice president. What? Yeah, hard to believe. It's just hard to believe. Oh, and by the way, the same people want to, castrate children because they like the color pink and they want to do all this. I'm speaking metaphorically before you all lose your shit. Okay. But they certainly want to do chemical castrations and so on. And I mean, we're talking about, we want an open border and defund the police and all the rest of it. Wear paper diapers on your face, because let me tell you, COVID was not a pandemic. It was a trial run. And don't think it wasn't. Because if Donald Trump weren't running for re-election that year, COVID would never have existed. Say I'm a right-wing lunatic, say whatever you want, I don't give a shit, okay? Because almost every single conspiracy theory that was touted 5 years ago is coming true, okay? You want to talk about the Russia hoax? Yep, Hillary Clinton, by the way, sold all her half her uranium to the Russians, so on. And censured liar Adam Schiff, got together and they promoted this thing, which, hey, we can't wait for Mueller time. The guy comes out and goes, well, it's all a lie. Okay, well then, why did we interrupt the presidency for almost the entire 3 years and not let him get on with his agenda? That's what we voted for. So when you're doing it to him, you're doing it to us.
What are we going to see with Fauci in less than 72 hours? What do you expect? What should happen, James? What would you like to see happen?
Well, the Wuhan lab was a bioweapons lab. Okay, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. And the NIH, as I understand it, am I correct? I think, did help fund the gain-of-function research, yes, which of course he denied, walked around it. There's going to be a lot of huffing and puffing, and the Republicans are all going to take their jackets off and, and roll up their sleeves like they did with Benghazi and like they've done with all their stuff. And, they're not going to do anything. And, I vote Republican because I keep praying and hoping that they'll actually do something to create or recreate an America that is based on sound American principles. Look, people say, oh, well, you're right. I said, look, here's all you want to know who I am? Politically, I'll tell you, it's easy. I believe in the living document, which is the Constitution of the United States. And I believe in law and order, even when I don't like that law. So, for example, I'm a Roman Catholic, have been all my life. I don't believe in abortion. I totally understand why and I have a lot of Democrat friends, liberal friends, and some of them we get along pretty well when we just sit down one-on-one. And I have one friend, she's a lawyer, she's a wonderful person, just a wonderful person. We end up kind of agreeing on everything. And I said, look, we're not going to agree on abortion. You're a feminist. I get it. I understand why. I'm Catholic. You understand why. We're just going to not let that ruin our lives. But if it were the other way around and the parties were reversed on their position on abortion, these lunatics would be out shooting abortion doctors, burning down abortion clinics, and so on, which I absolutely, firmly believe should never happen, even though I think what they're doing, personally, I think, is murder. So I'm stuck in a tough position, but I would never break the law because of my opinion. That's the law. The good news is we live in a country where you can change that law. We have redress of grievances. We have a way to do and create constitutional amendments. And there's a way to change that law. And for example, the Supreme Court, of course, recently reversed the whole fantasy of the Constitution somewhere saying that abortion was legal. I mean, the states can do what they want now, but finally the Supreme Court said it's an absurd belief to think that Roe v. Wade is absurd, and it was absurd according to what the Constitution says.
how did you make it this long in Hollywood? How did you become a legend with these opinions, James? Like this, you should have been run out. You should have been spontaneously combusted, actually, like in Hollywood. How did this happen? How did your career happen? Because you have this unbelievable career.
Well, I'll tell you why. A lot of my friends, but you're not going to believe this. I mean, I will never say a negative word about Whoopi Goldberg or Rob Reiner or Sean Penn or Bob De Niro, because I've worked with all of them or been friends with all of them. And, this is America. They're entitled to feel what they want and say what they want. I can vehemently disagree with them, and believe me, they but I bumped into Sean Penn a few years ago. I was staying in a hotel, and I bumped into Sean. He goes, "Hey, where are you, you lunatic?" I go, "You lunatic?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You want to have lunch?" We sat down at lunch, and we just talked through it all. And we probably disagree on everything, but when I did Ghost of Mississippi, I worked with Whoopi. I just loved Whoopi. She was kind to everybody. She was great to me. I know what Whoopi thinks. Whoopi's an American citizen. She can think whatever she wants. That's her right. And I have my right. The difference is I would not blacklist Whoopi Goldberg. And Whoopi personally wouldn't blacklist me. But, I had an agent fire me because he didn't literally sent me an email. "I'm going to fire you because of the 4th of July and I'm feeling patriotic." And I went, "You know what patriotism is? It's actually respecting somebody else's opinions, politically and otherwise. Just respecting it. You don't have to agree with it. That's the difference between you and me." And now he's on his ass somewhere. I don't even know where he is, but And the bottom line is, it's okay. But you have to be. Back then, people were a little more open. Look, when we were doing Oppenheimer, they said, "Look, we've all put a lot of money and effort into this. How are we going to handle your speech and your X and then, Twitter?" I said, "Look, I have to agree with you. I think too many people, what do? My father shed, my whole family shed blood all the way back to the American Revolution for this country. I should have a right to say something. But on the other hand, I guess there's a part of me that maybe wishes I'd never said anything, but then that's not America, is it? It's a tough spot." And, I'm sure that I was kind of stonewalled a bit more than I could have been. Look, if I just kept my mouth shut and said, "Oh man, I love Hillary." I'll give you a perfect example. I had 10 Golden Globe nominations. I won one. They would always ask me to come, "Hey, speak. We're going to do a thing pre-Golden Globes for the press, and would you come and be the monitor, be the the MC for it?" And I said, "Sure." And the guy, Phil, can't remember his name now, he said, "So, are you voting for Hillary?" I said, "Are you kidding?" They never nominated me again, never invited me back. It was like I had died. And which I guess is fine, but it's not America. But, now, in a way, they kind of did me a favor, because other than being the executive producer of Oppenheimer, there's not much I would want to do. And, people, I'll tell you, people ask me, "What do you think of Chris Nolan? What do you think of, have you seen the Odyssey and all this stuff?" And I said, "Look, I'm going to give you a different answer than the question you're asking." I was so honored. We worked for a couple of years, my friend David Wargo and I, to try to get the project to somebody. I finally got it to Chuck Roven in the middle of COVID. He got it to Chris. Everybody was trying to get Chris to make a movie, and Chris decided to make the movie, which is why why David and I are the two. And they don't do like a lot of movies do, all these executive producers. There's only usually one, Thomas A. Slip, who works. Anyway, and Chris runs it all. I just thought they were wonderful people. I wish I could have done more on the movie, but I was so honored to be a part of it. But you know, they move on. I was kind of silent during that time. When the fires happened, I got texts from a few people. One, a doctor of mine, said, "Hey, you guys have a place? I know everybody's trying to find a place." Emma Thomas, Chris's wife, of course, and his producer, Chris, I mean, the Nolans, Emma Thomas Nolan, you know, immediately texted me and go, "Here's our address. We have a bedroom waiting for you." But no, I was on the set once, and Chris screened the movie for me. They were lovely at the Oscars, all that. But I wasn't. Once we handed the project over, that was that. They acted like they were my best friends when that fire happened. And I will forever be indebted. Andy's the most brilliant filmmaker in the world.
Yes.
So when people ask me, I go, look, I'm not getting involved in this. I can't wait to see the Odyssey in IMAX. I only wish them the best. I love them and I appreciate them. I think Chris Nolan is a genius. And I think Emma is one of the greatest producers ever. And of course, my friend Chuck.
So zooming out, though, the casting of Elliot Page as a Greek warrior, Hollywood wokeness, DEI, race swapping, Black Little Mermaid, stuff like that. Snow White, right? The Disney live action remake of Snow White. These things lose a lot of money. And I guess the best tell is are they making money or are they losing hundreds of millions of dollars? And
well, wait a minute, hold on. Odyssey is on track to be probably one of the most successful movies in history.
And I think that's frankly why they did it, right? And Christopher Nolan obviously is a league of his own, but Hollywood in general as an industry, I think, is trying to do a major recalibration right now. I think probably the Passion of the Christ movies that Mel Gibson's making, those are going to make billions of dollars. But I think there's like a large recalibration that's happening in Hollywood. Did it go too far, do you think, over the last 10 years, 20 years?
Well, of course. Yeah. It's absurd. Here's the culprit. Look, I've been a member of the Academy. I've had 2 Academy Award nominations. I was on the executive branch of the executive committee of the actors branch. You can only be for 9 years, off a year, and back on again. And then I moved to New York. So I said, hey, guys, I can't go to the meeting. So they said, okay, great. And I stepped aside after another 4 years. So for 13 years, I was with a group of people, and our job was to be the ones responsible for getting and vetting people into the actors branch of the Academy. Pretty important job. And I am proud of the fact that one of the things that I was known for is I was the guy who was always saying, hey, my friend Jose Perez, he does just supporting, but he's a great actor. We should look at him. And I was always doing kind of DEI work, but because they deserved it. Who's a great actor, and I've worked with him. I've sat slack-jawed at his talent. He's so unbelievable. It's Denzel Washington. Oh, and by the way, he's black. Who cares that he's black? He's just one of the greatest film actors that ever lived. That's why. And look, there are so many great actors. Look, I understood when they were trying to fix racism in this country years ago. I understood, giving people an extra leg up so that we all had an equal opportunity. I think it was very important. Now I sound like the Democrat I was, and I'm proud of it. But then people started to just take advantage of it. So here's the thing. When the Academy decided a few years ago to institute rules that 50% of the lead acting talent had to be either minority or special needs or whatever, and so on. What it did, it wasn't necessary, first of all, because every minority actor I know who's in the movies is like great. I mean, as a special Peter Dinklage in Game of Thrones, Jesus, what a performance! He didn't need to have some special allowance to play that part. He was phenomenal. I was glued to the TV set. I mean, just giving a random example. So, the fact that they have to do that now in order to qualify for an Oscar, and let me tell you, no studio is going to put $250 million into a movie unless there is some qualification. I'm not commenting on Odyssey or the casting of Odyssey because I can't wait to see it. I haven't seen it. I love Christopher Nolan, love the Nolans, and I am 100% on Team Nolan. So I'm just going to sidestep that one, But when they do a remake, and I have a hard time because Disney, every time you ever hear the Disney voice of Hades, ever since whenever it was, 1997, that I created the character with that great team, every time on every game, at every theme park, on every cruise, I do that voice. I go into the studio and I do the, boy, we're going to do a new game. We're going to do the whatever. And it's great. So look, I think they know at Disney, the Snow White with, a bunch of guys parading around. It just wasn't, it was a mistake. And I'm sure they know it, but I'm not going to, look, it's really hard to make movies. And you know what's really hard? It's just as hard to make a bad movie as it is to make a good movie. And when you have a requirement that you've got to cast a movie a certain way, there was a rumor at some point that one of the software packages that's used for screenwriting actually had an alert in it that if there were a scene between two women talking alone in a scene, and for more than 35% of the dialogue, they talked about a man, it put up a red flag. And somebody from the studio said, you got to kind of have them talk a little bit more about, running for president or whatever the bullshit, But I'm not sure if that's true. But I thought I could believe it because the woke stuff has actually damaged movie making, And I told a story once about an actor I just wanted to see, a black actor, and I had not seen enough of his work, and I turned on this TV and I said to Sarah, oh, this is great, this movie, it's a cop movie and so on. She said, yeah, J.K. Simmons is the villain. I said, why would you tell me that? When did you see this movie? She said, I didn't see the movie. I look at the casting. You have a black lead. The girlfriend is Hispanic. The only white guy in is J.K. Simmons of note. He's the chief of police. I said, yeah, but they're busting a crime thing. He goes, yeah, he's working with the bad guys. And of course he was. I mean, how do you make Saving Private Ryan? How do you make Oppenheimer next year? You can't. What are you going to do? You can't do it. And the bottom line is, it's just not necessary, man. You got so many talented people. Like, for example, I said there aren't enough women directors. Well, I have a lot of respect for women directors. In fact, I gave up a movie so that I could do Sofia Coppola's first movie. And my agent literally said, Sofia Coppola, the one in Godfather 3, forget about it. I said, well, she wrote a great screenplay. She's really smart. I think she's going to be a great director. And then, of course, we did Virgin Suicides together. And then I was lucky because Mace Neufeld, the director of the other film, General's Daughter, that I was going to do, and Sherry Lansing, the studio head, changed the schedule around so that I could do both movies, which I always want to mention because I think it was great. It's terrible what they've done to the business. I mean, look, I love being an actor. I love being a producer. I love creating stuff. And, I love now that I'm a songwriter, as you know, and I'm loving doing that. I love creating. I'm a guy who loves creating stuff. And if you want to create well, You can't do it with a committee, with restrictions, the Hayes office. Remember back in the Hayes office, a man and a woman couldn't be in a bed unless they both had one leg that had to be dressed, and they had to have 1 foot on the floor. And of course, you had to do things by suggestions. By the way, they wrote some great movies, Double Indemnity and all that was always by innuendo and so on. But when you have it that well, of course, people say, do you want to work? I probably could work. I'm not as blacklisted as it seems. I don't care because I don't want to go to Bulgaria every time you got to do something, because Gavin Newsom doesn't make it possible to film in Hollywood where movies were actually made forever. True. And we have all these empty studios and all these wonderful, talented people of every color, stripe, national origin, religion, all of it. We have it all here. And we all go to Canada and Georgia, and we never stay in California or Hollywood. And we have to do it according to all these rules. And it's almost impossible now to make a really good, interesting, different movie.
It's a horrible shame. And it's just the destruction of an industry that's so uniquely American. And
I'd love to be I'd love to be a part of it, but I don't after Oppenheimer, a multiple Academy Award winning director came to me and said, hey, I know that you're friends with Chuck Roven. And I said, yeah. And you did Oppenheimer together. I wonder if you'd want to produce with me and my other producer friend and Chuck, try to put this movie together. And we tried to do it. And I'm telling you, trying to get financing. Well, Saudi Arabia will do it. I said, well, it's set in America. I mean, okay, but they're going to do it with a volume screen. And then we're going to shoot the rest of it in Italy because they're going to put up some money. And I mean, I said, why don't we just go to Sony or go to Universal, these studios, and see if they want to make this movie and try. Well, yeah, and there's always a problem. And I have to say, it's now become so, and for example, the streamers, Netflix and Apple and so on, you'll see, hey, we're going to do a series. And they do a lot of great series. But there'll be a single season series, 6 episodes or 8 episodes. And you're watching it, and as a filmmaker, I'm thinking, this is really a 2-hour movie with a couple of subplots that are going on. And they can't make any money if they just put it out once. They got to have people want to watch it for 6 or 8 hours. So it goes on a bit.
A lot of filmmakers moving to New York. What's your take on Mandami?
I think the election of Mamdani, and I think in the dark of night packing of Minnesota as a Muslim enclave will be seen in the future historically as the turning point when America was gone forever. I think the election of Mamdani was the most dangerous event to happen in this country since, obviously the Civil War and slavery, horrible beyond imagination. But, in modern times, the election of Mamdani, and as it turns out, I think when Barack Obama said he was going to, and I'm splitting an infinitive here, but I think he did as well, he was going to fundamentally change America, I got the same chill up my spine as people got when Donald Trump said euphemistically, some people said, we're going to make America great again. Look, I think America is the greatest human endeavor in the history of humankind. Redundant there. I think it's in terrible trouble. I mean, the city where the World Trade Center was, and the people in it were slaughtered, destroyed and slaughtered. how you could ever allow this Muslim invasion and cancer. And you say, well, what are you? Are you prejudiced? Or, well, yes. I'm sorry to say it. And don't keep it, if you quote it, just that. I'm prejudiced against a religion that's really a religion, that's really a political jihad that actually has in its revered text that you will kill every non-believer. You know, I'm a Catholic. I believe certain things. I don't think certain other religions, you know, share my view, but they have a right to do it. This is America, and I'd say you have a right to do it anyway. But you don't have a right to practice something where part of it, I'm not going to sign up for, you know, Team Muslim, Team Islam, when Team Islam says, oh, and by the way, we want to kill every one of you who's not us.
Yes. We just
now
saw
you got a problem. Now you got a problem.
I was just with my family.
But here's how they're going to do it. They're going to kill us. They're going to outbreed us and kill us, and it's going to be done because they're doing it in other places. Christians in Sudan and other places, they're being slaughtered they're being eradicated. They're being eradicated. You know, I mean, and you know, what's going to happen on September 11th? Is Mandami going to go speak at the World Trade Center site?
They're asking him not to. They're saying, the families are saying,
oh, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Are you kidding? This guy. I mean, look what they did when the police all turned their back on the last clown they had in office. There. I mean, I don't know. Look, New Yorkers are allowed to do what they're doing, but I have friends who live in New York, and I go, man, you know, you get what you vote for. My friends, I didn't vote for him, you know, and they're all going to be moving out. And now that he wants to tax, you know, pied-à-terre homes, they're just taking the whole tax basis out. Then they're going to ask the rest of us, you know, to pay. Well, the federal government will take care of it. You know, the federal government, that's you, buddy. That's you and me.
Right,
Jim and Benny are going to have to be in it, and all the rest of it. Look, I wrote a song that is going to be, you and I were going to talk for a second about Tombstone Opera, my last album with Shooter Jennings and Bob Wayne. But we have a new one. Oh, there it is. But we have a new one that we're cutting in August. But there's one we have written. The one we're cutting in August will be released next September. But we're releasing one in October as well after this. But there's a song in it called, I'm just going to give this one little teaser, and it's a year in advance. But it's called America, Where Have You Gone? And I am so proud of this song. And every time Bob and I sing it together, I mean, he really sings it. I'll get in there if we can do it together because I'm not a great singer, but I can sing a little bit with him. But man, my dad, when he was in the South Pacific, wrote a letter to my mother. I'm sorry, to his mother. And he said, Mom, it's really bad here. He had, as I said, 2 Purple Hearts. He said, it's just horrible here. And just, there's almost no chance I'm going to come home. And I don't want them to ship me home and make you even sadder. I told them, man, and this is one of the lyrics, don't box me up and send me home. Just leave me where I fell. And to think that an American citizen trying to do what's great for his country would be so heartbroken and yet still fight for his country is such an extraordinary thing. And now we've got this Ugandan rich kid running the biggest city in America. It's just appalling. It's heartbreaking. And you know what? They're going to pay the price. Because I lived in New York under Dinkins. I lived there with the squeegee guys and the crime and everything else. It was just horrible. It was unlivable. You know, and they were going to declare bankruptcy and have, you know, the federal government will take care of it. Sure, we're all going to take care of it. Sure, we'll take it. You guys ruin every city. I mean, we're in Los Angeles. I've lived off and on in Los Angeles forever. I mean, I love California. What they have done to this city. I mean, Sarah and I, we kept like a record. How many naked guys can you look at going? I mean, I was literally sitting in a sushi restaurant, a little nice little restaurant. And it was in West Hollywood on like Melrose or Beverly. It was really nice. And, it's just the two of us. We're having little pieces of fish. And the bill was like $185 on it. And I look out the window, and there's literally a guy pinching a loaf by the fire hydrant. And I thought, this kind of doesn't work, It's a lot of money to have that as the my inspiration for dessert. It's like, you want dessert? No, thank you. I'm good. Here's my card. Thanks. I mean, you can't live. You can't. I go play poker downtown sometime. City of Commerce, they have these tournaments. And I'll go downtown. One time I was driving down there, and those big boxes that the big TVs come in, the big cardboard boxes. They're not lying on the side of the road, trash everywhere, it's shit, garbage, and horrible. And I thought, oh, that's there. And I waited to see how long it would be before somebody cleaned up that box on a state highway. It was 5 years ago, and last time I was there probably 4 months ago, it was still there. It's just trash. And now, when Jerry Brown was governor, the prisoners used to be, the trustees would get out and they would clean up the garbage. And everybody said, he said, well, you can't have human beings cleaning up the garbage. And I go, these guys are in prison. They're in jail. They're thrilled to get out in the fresh air. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But, at least you got a shot at escaping, if nothing else, And then for some reason, I guess the same thing under this clown and so on. I mean, they just do whatever they want. For example, we have the death penalty in this state, the vile, disgusting scum who murdered Polly Klaas. He was supposed to go to the gas chamber or whatever they got now, whatever they should have gallows in the public square when you murder a child.
Yes.
You should know that that's how your life is going to end.
Yes.
That's what they should have. And I don't give a shit what anybody thinks about my opinions, quite frankly. But there are a lot of people who feel the same way I do. When they're murdering children, you got to be hanged in the public square. When they talk about a public execution or a public trial and so on, now they've whittled it down. The 4 people who are affected are in the chamber and they watch this guy go to sleep with a needle and so on. It's not when you murder, well, I can't say this because it's still being adjudicated, but when you murder somebody, when you assassinate somebody because of their political opinions, you got to pay a price where it's understood that America does not allow this because you are taking away my right. If you assassinate a president or a presidential candidate, and I'm referring now to Bobby Kennedy, or at the time Donald Trump, or other people where you've tried to, the candidate and so on, you are depriving me of my right as an American to make a choice about who I want to have as president.
Yeah. Yes. Were you talking about Charlie Kirk there?
Well, that trial is going on, so I'm not going to comment on Charlie Kirk. I will say this about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, I was involved with a group of people who helped fund Turning Point USA. And Charlie would come and he would speak, and he was, and I was really hard on him the first time I heard him at my friend's house. There was just like 12 of us. And I went, well, wait a minute. So where does the money go? How does it? Because I'm a fanatic about, hey, we're raising money. Do you fly private jet, all this stuff. And man, this guy just bam, 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 bam. He answered everything right straight to it. And I got to say, I really admired him. And then I always went to my friend's house, and she had these fundraisers. And I just loved listening to him. The last time we saw him, a few months before he was killed, he had laryngitis and he couldn't speak. And he said, listen, I want you all to get your money back. And we all said, Charlie, forget it. I said, Charlie, can I just kind of take over because I've heard you speak? And he said, sure. And he had his people speak, a couple of them, and then I got to speak for quite a while of all the stuff I knew he felt. And I was so honored. And Sarah sat between me and Charlie. And Charlie was just so nice. He was such a wonderful person. And Sarah said to me, to watch somebody that you know and like, that you've actually talked to and really care. And Sarah doesn't cater to anybody. She doesn't care who they are. But she's very friendly to people who are respectful of me and of her, and and so on. She said, I just thought he was such a nice person, such a great person, and to literally watch the act of murder happen. She said, you lived through 9/11, you lived through the Vietnam War, you lived through that time. She said, it was just, I can't get over it. And I don't think any American should have to suffer through that. And I'm not going to now talk about Charlie, but in any case like that, without the punishment being commensurate to that heinous act, because you're not killing. When you assassinate Bobby Kennedy, when you assassinate John Kennedy, when you try to assassinate Donald Trump, when you assassinate Charlie Kirk, whomever, you are assassinating America. And I'm an American. So my little part of America, and the little part I do by paying my taxes and obeying the laws, and maybe sharing some thoughts of mine that maybe will give somebody thought. And of course, everybody's going to say hateful shit because, that's what they do on X. But I'll have my 5 million plus followers who are there for a reason, like yourself, who will say, yeah, I kind of agree with that. And, there are times, we're chatting like this, and maybe you get a little, emotional, but man, the murder of Charlie Kirk really affected me. And I think that it's possible that this country is dangerously close to having a civil war, and we're so fortunate that we don't have a civil war that could be defined geographically, because that's how it can happen easily. When it was the Mason-Dixon line, North and South, well, the South was an agrarian society that relied on slavery, and the North was industrial and didn't need the slavery. Of course, if they needed it, they probably would have been a different story. But the bottom line was, it was easier for a civil war to happen. Now, you sit with people and you say, man, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? But I don't want that to happen. I pray it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I pray that we don't have vigilantism. But man, things are getting so crazy in this country. This Democrat Society, Socialists of America. And by the way, how is it that people don't know anything about history in this country?
Well, okay, so history might repeat itself. Last question I have for you. I'm sorry that we've gone long here, but Kamala Harris.
I'm sorry.
Kamala Harris announced that she's going to run for president. Yesterday.
Yay.
They leaked that out. What's your response? Very quickly, James.
I couldn't be happier. First of all, everybody who's a citizen of the United States should be able to run for president. But I am way particularly happy that Kamala Harris is running, because I think she's a terrible candidate. And she said people didn't get to know her the last time. I'm thinking, boy, I hope they get to know you more this time, because then for sure, I think I think there are some great opportunities. Thank you for promoting Tombstone Opera. I appreciate it. By the way, you can get the vinyl at jameswoods.com. I have to promote it. Thank you so much.
Here's the site.
And you can also hear it on Spotify and Apple and all that. And I'm very proud of it. By the way, it was written because when the fires happened, a major coincidence, I'll be very quick. Shooter said, hey, would you be interested in writing with Bob Wayne a neo-noir Western? I go, well, I'm not a cowboy. What's a neo-noir Western? Everything about it seemed wrong, except I really like this guy, Bob Wayne, and I love Shooter. I said, okay. And then the story started to grow about this kind of guy was an outcast, meets this girl, is kind of an outcast, and somehow they come together and he tries to change and better his life. And I just the two words came to me. I said, what are you going to call it? I said, Tombstone Opera. Not an opera, set in the West. And the story in it was all inspired by watching my beautiful Palisades burn to the ground because of Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. So there's a message in this album, and it's a great album. I'm very proud of it.
It's a great album. I can't wait to listen to the vinyl. You can pick it up right here. It's jameswoods.com, and you can find the Tombstone Opera.
No space.
Yep. And you can also find it right here on James Woods' X handle and his YouTube channel. I got to check that out, James. Thank you. Godspeed.
Thank you, Benny.
What a patriot. What a legend.
I'm sorry I talked your ear off, by the way. I hope I wasn't rude, but I kind of just, you got me free rolling.
No,
I was so forward to talking with you.
Incredible. It was incredible. Godspeed, James. Thank you.
Thank you. Godspeed you. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, right over to another legend, Tim Burchett, who I'm sure was very excited to hear the gallows talk from James Woods. Right now, Congressman Tim Burchett. Here we go. I don't know, man. I don't know. I just have like the two greatest talkers maybe ever on the same show.
Hey, man, James Woods. I was sitting there thinking my buddy Benny is deservedly in the big leagues, and then he's got to follow up with the 435th most powerful member of Congress. All I could think of was when I'd married. I hadn't even married my wife yet, and we were at the beach, and we had her little girl, which is now my little girl. And I remember she had this little yellow bathing suit on, and she was running, and we were the first ones on the beach. Nobody was out there. And I fell down on my knees, and I was laughing, and I was thinking of my parents and about how happy they would be there in heaven that I was getting what I wanted, was a family. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, I'm going to soak this up because this will be gone one day. And I hope you're soaking this up because James Woods, what a patriot. I mean, he likes 356 Porsches, which I've had a bunch of. My daughter likes horses, so I don't have any of those anymore. He wants to execute people that abuse children. I put the legislation in to do that. He's a great actor. And of course, I played Stephen Foster, who wrote My Old Kentucky Home in the West Hills Elementary School play, 1975, I believe it was. It was huge. And then of course, maybe I'm breaking news here, but Mr. Woods is negotiating with Matthew McConaughey to play me in the Tim Burchett story.
Okay. So what would that story look like with Dr. Fauci? That's what I really want to talk to you about this week. Up on the hill. Have you been reading his diary? Have you been reading this?
Gosh, I'm just afraid I'm glad I'm not in it. I always remember, though, Benny, and our former leadership, which I had a lot of problems with, brought him in on the early days of COVID, and they treated him like a rock star. And I remember our conference, the Republican conference, gave him a standing ovation. And I was sitting in the back, and I turned to the guy beside me. I said, "That's a little premature. I don't know about this guy. I mean, I didn't know him from Adam, but as it turned out, my gut was right on that cat. The stuff wasn't because somebody ate a bat in a wet bar or whatever it was over in China. It was. Can I tell one quick story on the Fauci COVID thing? I'm sitting there. I'm a young representative. I'm 435th most powerful member of Congress. And, every morning you get in your routine. You see the same guys that are brushing their teeth at the same time that's in the gym, the same guys that are working out at the same time. And you kind of develop this sort of thing, and so I was standing next to this ranking member on intelligence, and he said, "Tim," I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Have you been following this COVID thing?" And I said, "Just a little." I said, "Something out of China, some place called Wuhan or something?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, and he just keeps looking ahead, Ben. This is like something out of a movie, and I'll never forget this. And he said, "You know what else is in Wuhan?" I said, "No, what's that?" And he said, "It's their biological weapons. the facilities there. And I go, really? And he says, you know what else China has a problem with? He's still just combing his hair, brushing his teeth. And I said, no, sir. What is? And he goes, the other problem China has is people are living too long. And I'll never forget that conversation. And I remembered thinking how the Chinese, up until the 70s, you know, they had a plan that they were going to drop nuclear bombs on their own people just to see what the outcome would be. They're ruthless. They get it as far as that goes. I mean, not like we think. My dad fought after the Pacific. He was like James Wood. My dad fought in the Pacific, in the Marine Corps, and fought the Japanese all the way across the Pacific. And then he went to China. And he would talk to me how the Chinese, just their mentality, how they would just sacrifice people. You know, they'd literally move mountains. There's cases where there was a factory and they just picked up the pieces and got all the peasants just carry this over the mountain. And, you know, and they just did. And if they died, they died. And
so they dropped a nuke. They dropped a nuke on our country. And it's COVID. They dropped a nuke on the entire world. And they did it with Dr. Fauci. And I know that you know Rand Paul. I know that you're no fan of Dr. Fauci. What do you think is going to happen in the next? What should happen? How about this? What should happen?
I think he should be brought up on charges. I think our Justice Department ought to take the information that's coming out of Jim Jordan's committee and that Rand Paul, his committee, obviously will be. Rand has been on this thing like a dog on a bone, man. He ain't going to turn it loose, and I love him for that. He's been right on this issue all along. He's never given up, kind of like Mike Lee and some of the others on the Save America Act. But the reality is that will we do anything? Probably not. You and I have talked about compromise, and ultimately this town is compromised. And Trump's running into that time and time again. You know, he fires the top 2 or 3 people, but it's that layers the onion, that deep state, we call it, that sewer that is Washington, D.C. And both parties are in on it, because both parties have members that have profited from it, I think, ultimately. And that's what'll stop it. They'll delay. And they know if they get to a next administration that it loses some of its luster. You know, nobody talks much about the poor people that were, in my opinion, were wrongly imprisoned during January 6th, but they should. But it just, again, we want our pizzas in 30 minutes or less, and that's about our attention span. And I'm guilty of that as well. But I think this is something we better. I remember I was a Sigma Chi at UT, and there's somebody had inscribed something on the bathroom wall, and it says, if you fail to, if you fail to follow history, you're doomed to repeat it. And then it said ... next quarter. And so we're not paying attention to history, brother. And this will happen to us time and time again unless we pin somebody to the wall on this one and we call it out.
So you think, I mean, you can see it in the diary. He was just straight up lying about everything. You can see how he was celebrating shutting down schools, children, and how he was, he knew that it didn't come from the wet market. You could see it. He was lying to the public. He was lying to Congress. He's been caught in many lies to Congress. You say that you should bring him up on charges. It's like, if there's ever an example to set, you got to set it here.
Yep. The highest paid person in the federal government was Fauci, from what I understand. And I think some people, I don't know if he has personally, but I've been told he has, but I think some others have profited from that. I think some people probably in Congress, maybe in both parties, have. Again, can you prove it? Probably not. Does my gut tell me that? Yes, because there'd be no other reason for him to do that. The greed and the professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, to me, comes into play. The verse out of the Bible. But I think he's probably, there's probably somebody else pushing his button, but I think ultimately he needs to be made an example out of. But I don't think they will. I think they'll run the clock out and he'll be so dadgum old by then, and it just won't happen, Benny.
Do you think that's not going to happen because of the CIA tie-in? Because, I mean, you know, he's running the bioweapons program, right, with the CIA, and he was going to the CIA, and he was bribing those scientists. I mean, do you think that this is going to be some type of intel operation to protect?
I think so. I think what we've, how crazy is it? You know, I was talking about the UFO issue and how I'm talking to the White House. and our own administration is being blocked by some of those very people in these alphabet agencies on getting information on UFOs. Stephen Miller told me that. So I was, you just exasperate, you put it out over the whole government and look at all the other things they do. And this is just another one of many. And this is child's play for them because they know they're going to run the clock out on this administration on this thing. And they know they will. And they've got enough people in power that can do that kind of thing. And again, I'm not suicidal. So as I always say, if you find me with 13 bullet holes in the back of my head, I did not kill myself.
Do you think that the CIA knew about this? Do you think that there was American intel operations funded COVID to create a bioweapon in order to rig an election? Is that your belief, or what's your?
I think that fit into it. I think a lot of times, though, they just light the fuse. Sort of like some of these so-called assassins that we allegedly have had lately. I think they just light a big fuse and see where it goes. And it also, when there's also mischief going on, it justifies their being who they are. And under Trump, a lot like under Reagan, they just didn't have the control that they needed. And they don't have the control because Trump's a wild card, man. He flips the table every freaking day, and I love it. So,
So are you going to be Team Kamala along with James Woods?
I don't know. Maybe I missed that part of the conversation.
She announced, soft announced she's running for president. Yeah. Sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I tell you what, we better be careful about that because she'll line up with AOC, and I guarantee. And there's not a lot of young people that are come into the House chambers and squeal when I walk on the House floor, but I see it when they do when AOC does and that crowd. And we have totally missed the boat. Our public education systems, everybody's like, oh, we need to fire them because they said something about Charlie Kirk. And then, but we really ought to look at is the people and the lifestyles these people lead that are hiring these people, because we never get them. And all they do is the people that do it, they just go underground for a little bit or issue a little press statement and they're off. And then the next go around, they're hiring somebody else. This is public education. In Knoxville, Tennessee, or Knox County, where I was mayor and Glenn Jacobs is currently the mayor, there's a communist, a guy that, in my opinion, he marched with Maduro 6 years ago. And then he said, oh, it's a youthful indiscretion. And they start questioning, well, I was marching for the workers down there. Maduro, a communist who tortured, murdered people that Trump took out. It's awaiting justice now, and he'll get it. And this is in Knoxville, Tennessee, dude. This is not in New York City. We better pay attention. And they're going to try to, oh, you're a McCarthyite because they're going to try to label you if you call something out for being a communist. Folks, they are communists. They hate this country. They want to destroy it.
McCarthy was right. Yeah, that's like
they want to destroy you and me. And we better. And I like what James Wood said. I got a lot of friends of mine in Congress that are left wingers, and they're my friends. I pray for them. I don't vote with them, but they're still my friends. And occasionally somebody gets in their face, and I get in between them, and I get brutal. I get criticized on the internet. I don't care. In the South, we still try to look after ladies and some of people that are weaker than we are. But still, we have just allowed them inside. They are not on the other side of the gate. They are inside the fence.
So your fear is the Kamala AOC ticket.
Really is. I said this. I remember one of our leadership said this when I was first elected. All the freshmen were gathered around. He says, I know you all think, each one of y'all think you're my favorite, but my favorite is AOC. And everybody's like, woohoo. And I said, y'all better be careful. You're going to make a martyr out of her. And because I've seen this so many times, nobody ever listens to me. It's funny. They all cussed me when I got to Congress, and now people ask me to come to their districts and help them, which is kind of odd, kind of funny, really. But no, we make a martyr out of these people, and these young people are taught this stuff, fed that capitalism is wrong. And people like James Wood are dinosaurs or something, and really they're pretty progressive in my opinion, because he's got some serious guts in a town that's just a hellhole. So, but no, I think we better watch out. We better watch out. And too, when our leadership or somebody says, oh, she was a bartender, like, give me a freaking break. She worked, she had a real job and she worked. And, I'm not a drinker, They always give me free Cokes when I go to bars in Knoxville. Always tip well, but or free water. But the truth is, people that are usually working their way through school or something, or ladies or single moms trying to take care of their kids because their dirtbag old man won't give them any money. And so, we are just missing the boat on everything. We better get back to our messaging. We're the worst messengers in the world. When Donald Trump gave I thought it was fantastic, his State of the Union address. Matter of fact, I tried to get hold of James Woods to invite him as my guest for the State of the Union, but I don't know how to get in touch with him. Matthew McConaughey won't give me my number. But anyway, but you know what our message was that week, when we could have been talking about that sweet little girl, I think her name was Delilah, that got run over by an illegal. We had a bill dealing with that. It came up like 3 or 4 weeks later, or something to do with anything. But what was our messaging? We were messaging on appliances that week.
Yeah,
President Trump's given us some great ammo. The big beautiful bill's got some great economic stuff, energy independence, things like that, and we just missed the boat. We're messaging on appliances the week of the State of the Union address, and I'm over it. That's why you're not going to see Fauci do a day in prison, I don't think, and people are frustrated, and they should be.
Under Tim Burchett dictatorship, what would Fauci be getting?
He wouldn't get the air out of a jug, brother. How about that?
Okay. Tim Burchett, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry we have to cut early today. I could do this for the next 2 hours. This has been an amazing conversation. It's been two of the best talkers in the entire world, two of the biggest patriots in the entire world, Tim Burchett and James Woods, on the same program, talking about the same things. World War II, the gallows in the middle of the town square. We used to have a proper country here, and you can still have proper representation if you follow Tim Burchett right here on X. Godspeed, Congressman.
Love you, Benny. You're the man. You give me hope for our country, brother, and love those sweet babies and that beautiful wife of yours.
That's right, man. That's right. Glad to be out of New York. See ya. Ladies and gentlemen, we have called a few Patriots on this program. Patriot Mobile is our cell phone service provider that brings us to, well, these beautiful studios and this opportunity to have these incredible conversations. You should go to patriotmobile.com/Benny today. Call today and make sure that you are connected with the only Christian conservative wireless provider that exists in the whole world. Go to patriotmobile.com/Benny. Call 972-PATRIOT. Right now, use promo code Benny for a free month of service. They keep us locked and loaded when we are on the road, and you should stay locked and loaded with James 4:10, your verse of the day. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. Make sure, ladies and gentlemen, that you stay exalted with this program. Lock in. It's your boy, Benny. Remember, in the end, we win. Keep moving forward. See ya.
Where the truth gon' be, faith and freedom on your TV screen. Stand up strong, battle through the night. The Benny Show's here, bringing liberty to light. From the speeches to debates, Benny sharp like a blade, cutting through the lies, watch the truth cascade. With the warrior's heart, this man never fades. You know it's prime time when Benny invades. From saving the nation to stories untold, the Benny Show's a storm, see the truth unfold. Stay in the loop, let freedom take hold. Salting all the libs, soul never sold. It's the Benny Show, where the truth gon' be. Faith and freedom on your TV screen. Stand up strong, battle through the night. The Benny Show's here, bringing liberty to light. Liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light. Liberty to light. Bringing liberty to life. From the speeches to debates, Benny sharp like a blade, cutting through the lies, watch the truth cascade. With the warrior's heart, this man never fades. You know it's prime time when Benny invades. From saving the nation to stories untold, the Benny Show's a storm, see the truth unfold. Stay in the loop, let freedom take hold. Salting all the libs, soul never sold. It's the Benny Show, where the truth gon' be. Faith and freedom on your TV screen. Stand up strong, battle through the night. The Benny Show's here, bringing liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light. Bringing liberty to light.